On Market on Close, I'm Marley Caden, and we are closing out this market week with a look back at some of the headlines we saw on tariffs and the tax bill that made it past the House. I'm joined now by William Lee. He's the chief economist at the Milken Institute. William, thank you for joining us today.
Hi, Marley. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Now, what are some of your takeaways from today's tariff threats on the EU and on Apple?
Well, I think the tariff situation has taken up quite a bit of the news air oxygen in the air, it is a shame because it's really a much smaller part of the overall Trump agenda. But insofar as the tariffs themselves are concerned, President Trump wanted to reform the global trading system in a way that allows for the needs of the 21st century trade. We no longer are well served by that old WTO system that was set up after World War II. And so the tariff discussions that have been going on so far went incredibly well in the sense that our allies, those who are willing to partner with us and produce things in the United States and invest in the United States, like the UK and Japan, those deals seem to be coming along. Even China, which chose to be a competitor with the US, they don't want to produce here, but because they say, we produce so efficiently, we're going to produce at home and we're going to ship the stuff to you. And even those discussions are going along. But the EU is a special case. The EU has been incredibly difficult to deal with because they say, well, we don't have any tariffs. Why are you talking about? But nevertheless, the trade barriers are in the form of non-tariff barriers. And I think President Trump's gotten so frustrated with dealing with these morass of legal and health requirements and other standards that essentially he said, look, tariffs are now 50%, let's get on with it. And I think he's drawing the line in the sand and saying to them, get serious about reducing your non-trade barriers, or we just live with 50% tariffs. And I think that's the nature of the discussion so far, in that those who are willing to cooperate, the countries that we are trading with, have gotten deals, or at least have started to get deals done. But with the EU, which has been so ornery in terms of trying to get through with staying with the protectionist barriers that they already have really proved to be the most difficult people to deal with for the Trump administration.
Mm-hmm. And you say with fiscal reform being needed, that we're no longer served by the current status. What do you think some of the needs are of the global economy that will better serve us?
Well, I think what's happening is that after World War II, the U.S. was the strongest economy in the world. And so the WTO system was set up in a way that allowed every other country to recover from the devastation of World War II. Now we have a lot of countries rising into the middle class, like Brazil, countries in the Middle East, and they are advancing to the point where they are starting to invest in very advanced technologies like artificial intelligence and chip production. The trade that we see now developing between the South-South and North-South kind of countries is one that requires more regional agreements, more bilateral agreements, smaller agreements that are flexible and adaptable. And WTO just isn't set up to do that. And I think what we see with President Trump is a recognition that we need to have more flexible, smaller deals. And that's exactly the way that the discussions seem to be developing. And I think President Trump essentially is trying to reform not just the global trading system, but also restructure the U.S. economy. He's saying we need to rebuild manufacturing of the sort that will be high-tech manufacturing, produce high-wage jobs, and allow our citizens to benefit from the technologies that we're developing. And the rest of the world will benefit from that if they invest in the United States, produce in the United States these high quality and high-tech items. And if you do so, we'll put a tariff barrier around the United States that protects you from unfair competition. So I think that's the setup that I think President Trump is offering. And as I said, so far things have been going very smoothly until we hit the EU, and the EU essentially, which by the way doesn't have a lot of high-tech industries and benefit from importing our high-tech services, are putting in all sorts of barriers to limit how much we can export into the EU.
And you mentioned these domestic reforms, and part of Trump's plan is to bring manufacturing back to America, to make American-made products. Yeah. Do you think that that's an actual reality? Do we have the qualified workers? I mean, we know we don't have the physical buildings just yet, but do we actually have the workforce for that to be a reality?
You're not the first one to ask me, is it really feasible to do this in some realistic amount of time? And I think the usual answer is it takes a while to build factories. It takes a while to train people. And I think what we need to do is understand why it takes so much time. It's the amount of regulations that people face when they have to put up a factory. If foreigners want to build a factory the way they have built it, say in China, Chinese have built hospitals and factories almost overnight during COVID. If they did the same thing here, they'd run into different rules and regulations in California and other places that say you can't do this, you can't do that. One of the the three main items of the Trump administration is to limit the size of government so that we can free up resources for the private sector, to lower taxes, but most importantly, reduce regulations. And that's exactly what today's move about the nuclear deal, the nuclear executive order was about. Reduce the obstacles to putting up factories. And so if we do that part of the Trump package well, then I think it'll be much more feasible to bring in the kind of high-tech manufacturing jobs that we've already got commitments for from Saudi Arabia and from Japan, SoftBank, the billions of dollars to invest in artificial intelligence and semiconductors and data centers will be done much more quickly and in a realistic time frame than if we didn't get these deregulatory things. And one of the things about fiscal reform that I shouldn't forget to mention, the new bill passed by the House is the first time in my professional life that I've actually seen Congress address the growth of mandatory spending, healthcare. The fact that they're trying to limit the growth of Medicaid expenses, to me, is a phenomenal heroic act, because anyone who touches the third rail of politics, healthcare, right, will be guaranteed not to be elected again. And I think the House should be congratulated in its being brave enough to at least try to address the growth of healthcare. So that, to me, is a sign that maybe we actually are on the road toward limiting the size of government.
Well, we have to wrap it up there, William, but thank you so much for being with us, and we hope you have a wonderful Memorial Day weekend. Again, that's William Lee, the chief economist for the Milken Institute.